Hello, I'm Jonasz Lewiński. Welcome on board the Eastern Express. As always, I hope you enjoy the journey. On this episode, we're diving into the brutal reality on the ground in Ukraine, where ceasefires come with asterisks and artillery fire still defines daily life. While world leaders negotiate in comfortable conference rooms, the war rages on as towns face relentless bombardment and civilians endure unimaginable hardships. This time around, we'll give you a battlefield update, break down who's gaining ground, who's losing it, and why, despite endless diplomatic talks, peace remains frustratingly elusive. But first, let's catch up on exactly how Russia's so-called ceasefire looks in practice. Spoiler alert, it involves lots of artillery.
Despite all the talks and reports about ending the war in Ukraine, it seems that it is about to enter its next stage. Russia is conscripting 160,000 new soldiers to send into eastern Ukraine, which Moscow has turned into a meat grinder. While the front line has been a stalemate for several months, the Russians are now reportedly looking to gain as much territory as they can to have a stronger hand at any potential peace talks. In recent weeks, Russian forces have been successful in retaking swaths of the Kursk region, despite Ukraine's best efforts to maintain its foothold in the area.
Our troops have the strategic initiative along the entire line of combat contact.
Russia has not only been focused on the front lines, however. Each day it sends swarms of drones into Ukraine. Two of the most recent targets that have been hit the hardest is the Sumy region and Kyiv. Some of the hottest fighting has been taking place around the town of Pokrovsk. Russia has placed it under siege, but the Ukrainian army has so far been able to hold the Russian troops off.
We are maintaining active measures that prevent the occupiers from advancing into the Sumy and Kharkiv regions.
Given the current suspension of US military aid, it is difficult for Ukrainian soldiers not to be concerned with the situation on the front. Nonetheless, despite the reports of an upcoming Russian offensive, Ukrainian leadership is confident in the country's ability to defend itself.
And now let's zone in on the East-splaining portion of our show. The war in Ukraine has been regarded as a stalemate for the last couple of years. Nonetheless, while no major incursions have been made in the last few months, the Russian offensive has been moving slowly but surely further into Ukrainian territory.
Since the start of the year, the war in Ukraine has been focused on the eastern part of the country. Ukrainian intelligence says that the Russians are heavily focused on seizing frontline towns. In the last couple of months, the fighting has been most intense around two towns in particular. Pokrovsk in the south, around which Russian forces seem to be trying to pull off a pincer maneuver, is one. The other is Vovchansk in the north, closer to the Russian border and the city of Belgorod. Away from the front line, Russia has been regularly carrying out drone and airstrikes across the entire country. The targets of many of these are residential buildings and civilian and energy infrastructure. Outside of Ukraine itself, Russia has reportedly been successful in regaining much of the territory it had lost to the Ukrainian incursion into the Kursk region. Just in March, Ukrainian forces were to have lost the largest settlement they controlled here, Sudza. While some Ukrainian forces are still present in the region, observers point out that Kursk may no longer be the strong bargaining chip that Kyiv had hoped for.
And now, as always, it's time to examine the issue in greater detail. On the 1st of April, and sadly this wasn't an April Fool's joke, Russian forces shelled energy infrastructure in Kherson, plunging over 45,000 residents into darkness. All this despite ongoing negotiations for an energy ceasefire intended as a first step towards broader peace. Now, calling this a ceasefire is like calling your ex's 3 a.m. "you up?" text a friendly check-in. Technically accurate, but entirely missing in intent. The crux of the issue lies in the details, or rather, the lack thereof. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky initially proposed a temporary ceasefire in the sky, targeting missiles, bombs and drones. Fair enough, right? Well, the Russian interpretation of this seems to conveniently exclude short-range artillery. The "it's not cheating if it's abroad" logic applied to warfare. Russian troops have exploited precisely this loophole, using tube and rocket artillery to repeatedly strike Ukrainian energy facilities. It's like agreeing not to eat any desserts, but then drinking a milkshake, claiming it's technically just a beverage. The US, Ukraine and Russia announced an agreement for a temporary ceasefire on the 25th of March, but the exact terms remain suspiciously unclear. US President Donald Trump has advocated using the energy ceasefire as a confidence-building measure towards a broader peace. But Russia's actions suggest a different motive altogether. Russian Deputy Foreign Minister Sergei Ryabkov recently accused Trump's administration of scheming, complaining that the American peace plan doesn't address what Russia calls the root causes of the war. Now, root causes in Russian diplomacy typically mean two things: NATO expansion and alleged mistreatment of Russian speakers in Ukraine, claims that have been debunked more thoroughly than flat earth conspiracy theories. But here's the deal. Putin has recently intensified efforts to delegitimize the Ukrainian government entirely, proposing instead a temporary international administration for Ukraine under UN supervision. But much like couples therapy with your mother-in-law as the counselor, it's a trap. The Trump administration, surprisingly, has drawn the line here. The only problem is that Russia has made zero concessions, rejecting even Trump's offer for a general 30-day ceasefire. So, let's summarize. Russia negotiates a ceasefire to stop attacking Ukraine's energy infrastructure, continues shelling anyway, and demands Ukraine's total capitulation. As long as Moscow continues manipulating diplomatic language to justify violence, true peace remains elusive. Because ceasefires don't work unless all sides really mean it. And now here to shed more light on the issue is Rostislav Hotin, senior Ukrainian editor at Radio Free Europe, Radio Liberty. Hello and welcome to TVP World.
Hello.
So let's discuss the frontline situation. We recently heard a lot about a ceasefire, at least a limited one. But from what we can hear, this ceasefire is rather half-baked and a bit flimsy, isn't it?
Yeah, that's true. Ceasefire is not holding. Both Russia and Ukraine targeting each other with drones, and Russia also uses guided bombs and missiles against Ukrainian city. The thing is that Russia agreed for at least for the energy ceasefire, not to target Ukrainian energy infrastructure. But even now, in the last 24 hours, Russia targeted energy infrastructure in Sumy region, damaging the electricity substation there. Plus, Russian artillery targeted the electricity lines in the Dnipropetrovsk region, which is not far from the front lines in eastern Ukraine. So Ukraine also can't sit idle. It responds to these Russian actions. For instance, Ukrainian drones hit the Kursk region of Russia this night. Russia also, the thing is that one thing is gives a little bit a glimpse of hope, because Russia didn't target Kyiv, Ukrainian capital, for the second night by drones. So we'll see. But so far there is no actual ceasefire. No energy ceasefire. Energy infrastructure has been, and civilian infrastructure also has been hit by Russia in Ukraine very massively, almost on the same scale as before. But President Zelensky confirmed earlier that Ukraine is ready for unconditional ceasefire with Russia for 30 days, as he agreed in earlier, as Ukrainian negotiators agreed before with Americans in Saudi Arabia in March.
So in exchange, Russia is mounting further conditions. They're actually backtracking on what they said earlier also. Do you think that this strategy might result with what we were talking about quite a while ago, i.e. President Trump seeing through the Russian tactics, which involves delaying the whole process and basically trying to gain as much foothold on the ground as possible, and choose to help Ukraine more instead? Is it still a possibility at this stage?
Yeah, it's a stick and carrot approach from the Americans. On one hand, they're ready for further negotiations with Russia. Russian top envoy Kirill Dmitriev is going to Washington, and the American sanctions against him introduced just at the beginning of Russian invasion of Ukraine has been lifted temporarily. Washington has indicated that it is ready to soft or ease some kind of at least some kind of restrictive measures. But on the other hand, Americans also are saying that they're ready for more sanctions, even harsher sanctions against Russia, tariffs, especially against those countries who imports Russian oil and other products from Russia. Even the figure was mentioned, 500% tariffs in trade with the United States. So there are different approaches. The thing is that President Trump believed that he can achieve the ceasefire by the Easter, which falls on the 20th of April. But as things are standing now, maybe it's unachievable. We'll see. Still, there is a time. There were information reports that there may be another phone call between Trump and Putin. Even this week, we'll see how it goes. The Russian envoy, as I said, is going to the United States. We'll see how it goes. But so far, as things stand just now, right now, ceasefire is unlikely because of Moscow. But Ukrainian leadership is saying that Kyiv is ready for unconditional ceasefire with Russia.
What about the battlefield situation per se? Can you tell us more about, for example, the question of military equipment? Following the brief pause, it was indicated that the deliveries of American equipment to Ukraine would resume. Do we have any signals from frontline units when it comes to the availability of ammunition, spare parts and other equipment?
There was no reports so far from front lines that the temporarily withdrawal of U.S. Or suspension of U.S. military aid last month somehow had an negative impact on Ukrainian forces. There was also Ukraine is dependent very much on U.S. Satellite intelligence, especially when Russia launches ballistic missiles. American satellites immediately and anti-air defense systems all over the world, American systems immediately kind of notify Ukrainians that Russia is launching missiles against Ukraine. This was very crucial. But the exchange of intelligence information and supply of American security assistance, military assistance to Ukraine has been resumed promptly. American aid is coming to Ukraine. Generally speaking, about front lines, Russia is trying to mass troops in Kharkiv region for attack, but and in Donetsk, in Kharkiv they control just a tiny bit of territory. In Donbas region, in Donetsk region near Liman, and also in the south near Zaporizhia, in Zaporizhia region, the Russians are massing troops, but with no successful advance against Ukrainian position. But we should mention also that in March last month, Russian forces were able to occupy slightly more than 130 square kilometers of Ukrainian territories, newly occupied territories of Ukraine. Whether it's significant number, we don't know. It's like, let's say, 10 kilometers by 13 kilometers. It's not a big deal. It's but the amount of resources that Russians are putting in these operations, in these efforts to occupy, to gain upper hand and to occupy more territories of Ukraine are enormous, and losses are enormous.
That's a great point, especially since, according to the Defense Ministry of Ukraine, this month, in March specifically, Russia has lost more than 1,500 artillery pieces just that month, which is a record number from the beginning of the war. Speaking of resources, there have been reports that Russia wants to conscript about 160,000 soldiers, not mobilized, so theoretically they are not supposed to be sent to the front line. Instead of they are supposed to be inducted into the army, introduced to military training. But will it have any bearing on the way Russia operates on the ground, do you think? Will it free up more resources, more experienced troops from mainland Russia to be able to strike against Ukraine and be replaced by these new recruits?
The thing is with the recruitment in Russia that they recruit youngsters who are 18 years old and 18 plus year old. So they are not experienced. They are recruited for a couple of years to the army. It's like average thing for the Russian Federation to these recruitment campaigns. They are obliged to go to the army. They are not called to fight in Ukraine specifically. They are unexperienced, untrained. It will take time. 160,000. Yeah, it's a big number probably in terms of thinking about Russian numbers in Ukraine. Russian army in general, it's like 1,200,000 people, soldiers generally. Ukrainian army, by the way, now is about 800,000 servicemen. So it's a not big deal. But the thing is that these people, which are new recruits in Russia during this spring campaign, will not be immediately sent to Ukraine. That they have to be trained. They have to be prepared for this war. If they are sent, they are easy target for Ukrainians, and Russia will again experience heavy losses in Ukraine with its younger population, But generally speaking, now in Ukraine, more experienced Russian forces who are on contracts, military contracts, not recruits, but those who are on military contracts, they are serving in Ukraine, they are fighting in Ukraine, they are more experienced.
And one quick question about morale. Given the recent developments, the negotiations, which for the time being at least are not proceeding at a pace that Trump would have wanted, the limitations imposed, for example, on the long-range strikes against Russian refineries, how do all these developments affect the attitude of Ukrainian troops on the ground and their outlook for victory or at least a just peace?
Yes, Ukrainians do want peace, but the thing is, according to all opinion polls among population, according to interviews with soldiers, what we can guess, what we can kind of sense the mood that Ukrainians are for peace, are for ceasefire, but if this ceasefire will not give Russia a chance to rearm, regroup, to regain resources and to attack again, that's one thing. And also, if you're talking about in long term, the peace, that Ukrainians are not for any peace. They are for just peace, lasting peace, a kind of proper, normal peace treaty, but it's not achievable in the immediate future. It's possibly after ceasefire, if ceasefire will be held by both sides, will be respected by both sides, then maybe later, at the end of this year, we'll see how it goes. It's difficult to talk about time frame, but then it will be followed by a proper peace treaty.
Rostislav Khotin was our guest today here on TVP World. Thank you very much for joining us and for sharing your insight.
Thank you.
And now we're moving on to Eastern News Flash, a series of all the other stories from the East that you absolutely don't want to miss. India is reportedly seeking new oil suppliers as the US threatens to impose further sanctions on Russia. US President Donald Trump has said that he would tighten sanctions on Russian oil if Moscow doesn't comply with peace talks for the war in Ukraine.
India is currently the biggest importer of Russian oil. It has profited greatly from the sanctions imposed on Russia since the beginning of its invasion of Ukraine. These benefits include a purchase of oil at discounted prices, as Moscow was forced to seek new buyers for its resources. Now, however, India's refiners are looking at some different options for oil supply. Potential partners include deliveries from countries in the Middle East, the North Sea, and the Mediterranean. This shift stems from Donald Trump's recent threats to impose tariffs as high as 50% on all oil coming out of Russia. The American president has said that he is, quote, pissed off by the Kremlin's constant attacks on Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky's credibility as a leader. He has also expressed frustration with how Moscow has been unwilling to accommodate a ceasefire proposed by Washington.
Finland intends to withdraw from the Ottawa Convention and increase its defense spending to 3% of GDP. The convention bans the use of anti-personnel mines.
Helsinki aims to boost its GDP spending to the 3% mark by 2029, according to the country's president Alexander Stubb. This is meant to be part of the country's wider updated defense strategy and a sign that Finland wants to play a role in improving Europe's overall defense. In the case of the Ottawa Convention, Finland was initially hesitant to join it as anti-personnel mines are often used in border areas to impede an advancing army. Finland shares a very long land border with Russia. Following negotiations, Finland ratified the Convention Treaty in 2012. It isn't the only country to withdraw from the treaty, however. The Baltic states and Poland also recently announced that they would be stepping away from it to enhance their defenses against a possible Russian attack.
Russian leader Vladimir Putin has hosted Milorad Dodik, the wanted leader of Bosnia's ethnic Serbs, at the Kremlin. An arrest warrant has been issued for Dodik by the court of Bosnia and Herzegovina over accusations for anti-constitutional conduct.
Moscow continues to be a haven for various war criminals and controversial politicians. Vladimir Putin himself has an arrest warrant issued against him by the International Criminal Court. This time it can become a safe place for Milorad Dodik, the incumbent president of Republika Srpska, one of the two semi-autonomous political entities located within Bosnia and Herzegovina. He has been a strong supporter of Russia and of Vladimir Putin in particular. He has gone on record to call Russia a guarantor of peace in Bosnia and stated that he had backing from the Russian president. Dodik has threatened to pull the Serb statelet out of the wider country. Despite the warrant issued against Dodik, the politician continues to travel abroad and has recently visited both Serbia and Israel.
And for this episode of Eastern Express, it's the end of the line. Please stay with us here on TVP World for more latest news and updates.